Hi, I'm Danny and these are my diecast disasters. In this video, I'll be taking this Hot Wheels 1965 Ford Mustang convertible and turning it into a post-apocalyptic style armed tactical vehicle. So this is just a standard Hot Wheels Mustang convertible from a multi-pack. I think it was a Flames one. It's quite cool, white with the flames on it. And it has those quite cool sort of faux redline styled wheels. I start by drilling out the rivets and taking the car apart. It's always a bit tricky taking these modern plastic cars apart. They're really stuck on the rivets. There's not much to these cars, just a windscreen and an interior. I'm going to use the motor from this rigger motor, so I pull it apart and chop the motor out. I mark out where it will fit through the bonnet of the car and then cut this out. After stripping and burnishing, the car is painted with some thinned down rust effect paint. After this layer has just dried, I apply a mixture of dark and lighter toned rust washes. This breaks the bottom layer of paint in some places and adds to the rough, rusty effect. Once this layer is dried, it is sealed with a coat of matte clear. A coat of chipping medium is applied. After the chipping medium has dried, I use my airbrush to paint the body of the car white. To achieve the chipping effect, I first apply some water. Using a small stick, I gently scrape away at the top layer of paint. Be very gentle and patient, and the water will start to soften the chipping medium more over time. Notice here I press a bit hard and actually scratch down through the rust layer underneath the white. This is what I'm trying to avoid doing, so remember to be careful. Here is the car after I finish the chipping effect. I'm going to mount this gun on the car, so I'll have to chop out half of the windscreen. I completely lapsed out here and accidentally cut out the wrong side of the windscreen. I didn't even think because we have right-hand drive cars over here. Anyway, it just meant that I later had to cut off the steering wheel and stick it onto the other side. I also have to cut off this front section of the windscreen piece so that the motor can fit inside the bonnet. This was the same for the interior section. I use a skewer to add a little bit more dry rust effect paint, covering up any areas where I've scratched down to the metal and also adding some splotches of lighter colour rust here and there. To raise the wheels, I am going to use these little pieces of aluminium tubing. These are just glued onto the bottom of the chassis underneath where the original axle slots are. I use some epoxy putty to build up the struts. Once this had cured, I filed and sanded it down a little bit smoother. Some more aluminium tubing was used to make a wee diff and a drive shaft. I cut out some small pieces of styrene. Using a half round needle file, I file them to look like beaten up pieces of metal. Using my craft knife and a round file, I make some small curves in one of the corners of the pieces of styrene so that I can attach them neatly to the bull bar of the car. I attach a couple of long spikes and a chain to the back of the car and a little skull that I made to the back of the diff. The base is then spray painted with Molotow silver rattle can. A coat of thinned down dry rust effect paint is applied. Once this is dry, I paint some of the details in gun metal. A dark wash is applied. Some Humbrol iron oxide weathering powder is added. The rust powder is fixed with a thin coat of matte clear. The engine from the rigger motor is painted in gunmetal. I used some styrene to make a magazine for the gun. This is painted gunmetal. Some bronze is used to add details. The gun and motor later both have dark washes applied to them. I assemble the car and fabricate a wee roll cage. The interior had been painted with dark brown and then given a dark wash. A short turret is made out of aluminium tubing for the gun. And this is attached to a small steel sheet plate that I have fixed to the rear of the car. Gunmetal is used to tidy up some areas and paint the roll cage. This would later have dark and rust washes applied. I make a mesh roof for the roll cage. Using a couple of different sizes of aluminium tube, I made some exhausts to go on the rear of the car. These are glued in place so it looks like the chain is there to support them. With a big gun like that, the driver of this vehicle is going to need a box of spare ammo. There's quite a big ugly sprue on this casting, so I tidied up with a burr on my rotary tool. Once the crate is tidied up, it's painted a mid-tone brown. My tidied up side doesn't look too bad. A soft tone wash is applied. To finish the crate, I dry brushed it with a light brown. They are going to need some barrels of spare fuel as well. The barrels are given a coat of dry rust. Followed by a dark rust wash. Then painted light blue. Before this paint had fully dried, I used a little pick to scratch it off in a few places. Some silver weathering powder is applied to the base and some other metal areas of the car. Some metallic blue is added to the exhaust pipes, the skulls, and lightly to a couple of other metal areas on the vehicle. Thin wire was wrapped around some aluminium tube to make some small shocks. I'm going to put these cool looking off-road rear riders on it. They're nice easy ones to put on as the axle just pushes into the wheel. I used some modelling clay to make a post-apocalyptic mutant cattle skull. After the skull was painted, I added some chain and attached it to the front of the car. Some epoxy putty is used to replace the rivets. I use a small piece of sponge to dab a few mud splatters behind the wheels. The car is then weathered some more with some sand weathering powders. Before we take a look at our finished Mustang, let's take a moment to be reminded of what we started with. A tidy looking classic 65 Mustang convertible with some nice flames on the side. A nice looking car, but not much use in a firefight. And here it is transformed into our armed tactical version. It may be looking more rusty and chipped, but that huge motor and big off-road wheels will give it plenty of traction off-road. The big mutant cattle skull will stare you in the eye before you get mowed down by the metal plates and skewered on some spikes. There will be plenty of stopping power in that huge gun, along with the spare ammo stash in the crate on the rear of the car. The spare fuel barrels on the top of the car will give it plenty of range. There was quite a few steps to making this car, so thanks for hanging in there. I hope you like how it came out. If you like Mustangs, check out my Cherry 2000 Mustang custom video. Before we go, let's take it off the turntable and have a closer look. As usual, I'll just take a moment to welcome all my new subscribers and say a big thanks to everyone for the great comments and support on my videos. Thanks heaps for watching, and if you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe.